Ava Chen, founder and CEO of Etheria Innovations, a biotech company that is transforming the global pharmaceutical industry, had just finished a keynote speech on the future of personalized medicine. The applause was thunderous. Then, amid the cheers and quick interviews with major media outlets, my personal assistant, a vibrant young woman named Chloe, leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Miss Chen, there is a gentleman named Richard Vance in the private waiting room. He says he has something very important and urgent to see you alone." Richard Vance. That name, like an invisible needle, gently pricked a corner of distant memory, a corner that I had tried to lock away for a long time. It was the name that my mother, Eleanor Chen, only mentioned in rare moments of weakness, through old yellowed photos and broken tear-soaked stories. The man that my mother said was my biological father. The man who coldly turned his back without a word of acknowledgement when I was just a tiny creature who had not yet been born, pushing my mother and I into a spiral of discrimination, of years of struggle lacking love and material things. Now, after nearly 30 years, when this rejected daughter had stood on her own at the pinnacle of her career and fame, he reappeared with a strange look in his eyes, but carrying an incomprehensible pleading look, wishing to be received. Fate sometimes knows how to tease and test people's hearts. I grew up in a small, quiet neighborhood in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, surrounded by the love and endless sacrifice of my mother, Eleanor Chen. My mother is a beautiful, intelligent, and incredibly strong Chinese-American woman. After giving birth to me, she had to work all by herself, doing everything to support me. And my education from being a part-time accountant in a small company, taking on extra work, translating books at night, until later, when I was a little older, she pooled all her little capital to open a small, pretty bakery called Eleanor's Treats, right in the neighborhood. That bakery not only provided for my mother and I, but also held many sweet memories, where I learned my first lessons about hard work, perseverance, and unconditional love. My mother always taught me to be strong, to be independent, to hold my head high, and live no matter how difficult life was. She never let me feel a lack of affection, but the void of a father always smouldered in my young soul. My classmates had fathers who took them to school, had fathers who played juggling in the park, had fathers who taught them how to ride a bike. As for me, every time I asked about my father, my mother would just quietly pat my head, her eyes distant, then find a way to avoid the question with another story, or just say that he was very busy with work. He is in a very faraway place, can't come visit us. It wasn't until I was 16, about to apply to college, that on a rainy night, as we sat together in the cozy little kitchen of the bakery, I couldn't help but ask my mother again about that mysterious father. This time, perhaps because she saw that I was old enough to understand, or perhaps because she herself couldn't contain the pain she had been harbouring for so long, my mother decided to tell me the whole truth. With tears in her eyes, my mother's voice choked up as she recounted her passionate first love, Richard Vance. At the time, my mother was a promising medical student, and Richard was a handsome, elegant, and ambitious young businessman from a prominent and wealthy family in New York. They were madly in love, and it seemed like nothing could separate them. But then, when my mother discovered she was pregnant with me, everything changed. Richard, the man my mother had loved and trusted, had become cold and distant. He was afraid of responsibility. He was afraid that having an illegitimate child with a girl of unsuitable social status, like my mother, would affect his rising career, ruin the future plans that his prestigious family had arranged, perhaps a marriage with the daughter of a wealthy business partner. He perhaps, because of his inherent male chauvinism, did not want a nameless daughter to interfere with his life. Richard asked my mother to settle the pregnancy, giving her a large sum of money to shut up and compensate. But my mother, with the love of a mother and the pride of a woman, firmly refused. She decided to keep me accepting to give up her unfinished education, accepting to face the contempt of society and the cruel severance from the man she once loved. Richard Vance, after failing to convince my mother, coldly turned his back, cut off all contact, completely denied his responsibility as a father, and quickly married another woman, according to the family's arrangement, building his own perfect family, as if my mother and I had never existed in this world. After hearing my mother's story, my heart was broken. The shock was so great that I was speechless. I felt an extreme pain because I was rejected by my own father before I was even born. But more than that pain, there was anger towards that evil man, and a boundless love and admiration for my mother, the extraordinary woman who sacrificed everything for me. That night, I hugged my mother tightly, promising myself that I would live a good life, be successful, so that my mother would never be ashamed, and so that my father would one day regret what he had done. In the years that followed, I occasionally heard from my grandparents about Richard Vance's life. He became increasingly successful, wealthy, a famous businessman, chairman of a large corporation. He had a new family with a beautiful wife and legitimate children, handsome sons that he proudly showed off in society magazines. My grandparents told me that when I was a child, my mother tried to contact Richard several times, not to ask for money, but only to hope that he would accept me, give me a little love, a nominal recognition. But all she received in return was cruelty and coldness. Her desperate letters were returned without a reply. The phone calls she tried to make to his office were either blocked by his secretary or hung up on without mercy. Once, when I was about 5 years old, I was seriously ill and had to be hospitalized. My distraught mother went to Richard's company, hoping he would help with some medical expenses. But he, through his assistant, flatly refused and left a message saying, "I don't have a child named Ava. Miss Eleanor Chen, don't ever try to bother me or my family again. Her life has nothing to do with me." Those words, recounted by my mother later in tears, were engraved in my mind like a knife wound, an obsession that never faded. The absolute indifference, the cold rejection of the man who called himself my father, became a strong motivation, urging me to rise up to prove my own worth. The truth about my father had a profound impact on me. At first, it was pain, confusion, a feeling of abandonment and rejection. Then, gradually, those feelings turned into anger, resentment, and finally, a strong determination. I told myself that I didn't need a father like that. I had a mother, grandparents, people who loved me unconditionally, and I would have to live a good life, be successful, not only to make my mother proud, but also to make that man one day look back and regret for rejecting a daughter like me. My mother, Eleanor, always appeared strong and optimistic in front of me. She never spoke ill of Richard, never sowed hatred in my heart. She taught me how to live with my head held high, how to face difficulties with determination and confidence. But I know deep in her heart the wound has never healed. On long nights, I still sometimes hear my mother crying silently in her room. She has poured all her love, passion, and great expectations into me, her only daughter. My grandparents, who have been by my side, protecting and sheltering me and my mother since the very beginning, are my strongest spiritual support. They often tell me stories about my mother when she was young, about her unfulfilled dreams. They also did not hesitate to tell me about Richard Vance's true nature, about his selfishness, ambition, and patriarchy. They were the ones who instilled in me the belief in myself and my abilities, and advised me to study hard to change my fate. In the small neighbourhood where we lived, my mother, a single mother raising a child, could not avoid gossip, curious looks, and judgment from some conservative neighbours. That sometimes made me feel inferior and self-conscious. But then, those pressures further tempered my will, resilience, and determination to succeed. Although our material life was not very abundant, and sometimes even very difficult, my mother and grandparents always tried to create the best conditions for me to study well. My mother often said, "Knowledge is the most valuable asset that no one can take away from you, Ava." And I did not disappoint my mother's expectations. I threw myself into studying as a way to escape from the difficult reality, as a way to affirm my own worth, and as a way to move towards a brighter future. I showed my natural talent in natural sciences especially chemistry and biology. I was fascinated by the miraculous chemical reactions, by the complex genetic structures, by the limitless potential of biotechnology in improving human health and life. With excellent academic performance, I won a full scholarship to study biotechnology at Harvard University, one of the most prestigious universities in the world. It was a source of immense pride for my mother and grandparents. My university years were the years when I was able to freely explore the ocean of knowledge. I not only studied hard in the classroom, but also actively participated in scientific research projects, worked in modern laboratories, and constantly explored and discovered new ideas. My talent and passion was soon noticed by professors. At an international scientific conference for students, where I presented a groundbreaking research project on gene therapy for the treatment of rare genetic diseases, I was fortunate to meet Ms. Sophia Hayes. Ms. Sophia is an extremely successful Jewish-American businesswoman, president of a large investment fund specializing in supporting biomedical startups. She not only has a sharp strategic vision, but also a compassionate heart, always wanting to contribute to the development of science and medicine. Ms. Sophia was deeply impressed by my superior intelligence, confidence, and especially the burning passion in my eyes when I talked about my ideas. She saw in me not only a talented scientist, but also a potential leader, someone who can create great changes. Sophia Hayes decided to become my mentor, advisor, and strategic investor. She gave me valuable advice, important connections, and most importantly, absolute faith in my abilities. Ava, she told me, you have a brilliant mind and a kind heart. Use them to create miracles in this world. Don't let anything, not even your past, hold you back. With that invaluable support after graduating with an excellent degree, I boldly founded Etheria Innovations. Our company focuses on researching and developing therapies for cancer and other incurable diseases based on the most advanced technologies in genes and stem cells. Etheria's mission is to bring hope, bring life to millions of patients around the world. The road to entrepreneurship has never been easy. We faced countless difficulties and challenges, from lack of initial capital, consecutive failed experiments, fierce competition from large pharmaceutical corporations, to complex legal barriers. There were long nights when I stayed up all night in the lab, stressed to the point of collapse. There were times when I thought I could not continue. But then, the image of my mother, my grandparents, and even my father, who abandoned me, appeared again, giving me strength. I could not give up. I had to succeed, not only for myself, but also for the people who loved and believed in me, and for the patients who were waiting day and night for new treatments. And then our tireless efforts paid off. Etheria Innovations made major breakthroughs in medicine, finding new cancer treatments that were more effective and had fewer side effects, giving hope to thousands and thousands of patients. The company grew rapidly, becoming one of the world's leading biotechnology corporations, valued at billions of dollars. And I, Eva Chen, the girl who was rejected by her own father when she was still in her mother's womb, became a self-made millionaire. A scientist, a leader who is respected and admired by the whole world for her talent and great contributions to humanity. My mother, Eleanor Chen, can now hold her head high and be proud of her daughter. The bakery, Eleanor's Treats, is still there as a symbol of love and silent sacrifice. And now, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, after a speech that had made such a big splash, I was faced with Richard Vance, the man who was my father, and who had been a ghost from my past. He looked much older than the old photos I had seen. His hair was grey, his face deeply lined with worry and perhaps fatigue. Although he still had the elegant, refined appearance of a successful businessman in his eyes, I saw hesitation, confusion, and even a hint of belated remorse. I later learned that Richard Vance's visit to me was not accidental. His Vance Corp, after many years of prosperity, was now facing a serious financial crisis, at risk of bankruptcy due to poor investment decisions and fierce competition in the market. One of his legitimate sons, who was expected to inherit the business, was a playboy causing many scandals and debts. Or perhaps another deeper reason was that he himself was in the final stages of his life suffering from a serious illness and wanted to find peace, a compensation for past mistakes before it was too late. Whatever the reason, his appearance at this time when I was at the peak of my career was truly a stroke of fate. I invited Richard Vance into a private conference room away from the prying eyes of the media and other guests. Outwardly, I tried to remain professional, polite but somehow distant and cold. I looked at him as if he were a potential business partner or a stranger with a complicated past life. But inside, a wave of intense emotions was surging. The surprise of finally meeting the man I had only known through stories. A little bitterness as memories of my deprived childhood years of my mother's pain came flooding back. A little curiosity about the real reason he sought me out after so many years of silence. And above all, a self-control, a strength of a woman who had tempered her character through so many challenges, no longer the weak little girl who yearned for her father's love. I politely invited him to sit down, then waited in silence for him to speak. Richard Vance seemed a little confused by my calm. He cleared his throat, then began to speak, his voice trembling slightly. He spoke of regret of past mistakes. He recounted the difficulties he was facing. And finally, as I had vaguely guessed, he offered to get his daughter back to forgive him, and perhaps further some help. I listened patiently without interrupting or showing any emotion. When he had finished speaking, I spoke slowly, my voice calm but with an undisguised sharpness. Mr. Vance, I began deliberately addressing him by his last name like a stranger. I am surprised that you still remember my existence. For 30 years, I have wondered if I was even a small part of your memory. You talk about regret, about mistakes. I continued, looking straight into his eyes. So, have you ever regretted the nights my mother had to stay up all night to earn extra money to support me in my studies? Have you ever regretted the tears of resentment of a child who was always teased by his friends as a fatherless child? Have you ever regretted turning your back on your own blood just because you were afraid of responsibility, because of selfish calculations for your own career and fame? Each of my questions was like a knife piercing Richard Vance's conscience. His face paled, his lips moved wordlessly. In the face of my reasonable coldness, in the face of questions that delved into his undeniable past, Richard Vance completely lost the confidence and power of a successful businessman. He bowed his head, his shoulders slumped, looking pathetic. The pride and arrogance of the past seemed to have disappeared, leaving only an old, tired, and perhaps truly desperate man. Ava, he stuttered, his voice filled with pain. Father, I know I made a big mistake. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, give me a chance. One last chance. Opportunity. I smiled a smile devoid of warmth. You had 30 years to have a chance, Mr. Vance. 30 years of silence, of denial. So, why now? Why, when I have it all and you are struggling? The greatest punishment for Richard Vance, perhaps, was not my words, but my extraordinary success. The clearest proof of his mistake and loss in rejecting a talent, a daughter like me. Having to humble himself to beg for help, for recognition from the very daughter he had once heartlessly abandoned, that was truly the most humiliating, the most bitter lesson. As for the taking back thing, I shook my head. Mr. Vance Father is a sacred title built on love, on responsibility, on presence and on sacrifice. You gave up all of that a long time ago. I had a wonderful mother who gave me everything, who was both my father and mother. I don't need another father, especially one who didn't acknowledge my existence. As for forgiveness, that was a more complicated matter. I've tried to let go of the past, Mr. Vance. I said, my voice softer but still distant. not for your sake, but for my own peace of mind. Resentment, hatred only make my life more difficult. But forgiveness doesn't mean I can forget what you did to my mother to me. And it certainly doesn't mean we can have a father-son relationship as if nothing had happened. As for help, that was probably what he was looking for the most. If you came to me because of Vance Corp's business difficulties, I said my tone professional. Etheria Innovations is always open to considering partnership or investment opportunities that fit our strategy and are mutually beneficial based on transparent and fair business principles without any personal favours. And if you came to me for other personal reasons, I paused, looking him straight in the eye. I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. I can't help you any further. You have your new family, your legitimate children that you were once so proud of. Perhaps you should seek their help. I knew that in Richard's new family, one of his sons was suffering from a fatal genetic disease, a disease that perhaps only the advanced therapies of Etheria Innovations could hope to cure. Perhaps that was the main reason why he had humbled himself to seek me out. However, I added after a moment of silence, as a scientist, as a medical professional, I would never turn down the opportunity to save a life, if it is within Etheria's capabilities. If your son or anyone in your family requires medical assistance from us, please contact our specialist department. They will consider each case on a case-by-case basis based on the medical condition and standard procedures. But please understand that is completely separate from our personal relationship, Mr. Vance. It does not change anything about the past, nor does it create any obligations for the future. I stood up, signalling the end of the conversation. Richard Vance sat there, stunned, his face betraying disappointment, regret, and perhaps even a vague gratitude for my final offer. I don't know if he really understood what I said, but I had said what I needed to say, done what I needed to do. I left the conference room, leaving Richard Vance alone to face the consequences and his own choices. Stepping outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh alpine air, I felt a sense of relief, as if an invisible burden that had been weighing on my soul for so many years had finally been lifted. The greatest ghost of the past had been faced, and I had won. I love, appreciate, and am even more grateful to my mother, the extraordinary woman who gave me life, love, and the strength to overcome everything. I will call her as soon as I leave here to tell her how much I love her. I will continue to focus on the mission of Etheria Innovations, on researching and developing new medical therapies that bring hope and life to millions of people around the world. I will continue to build a happy and meaningful personal life, perhaps with a partner who loves, understands, and appreciates me for who I am, someone who will continue to write brighter chapters in my life story. He did not acknowledge me as his son, but the whole world had to acknowledge my talent, my intelligence, and my contributions to humanity. That recognition, along with my mother's boundless love, is all I need the true legacy I want to leave. I have written my own life story, a story that has no room for denial, no regrets of a father who once turned his back, but only the light of hope, of determination, and of love. When the father who cruelly rejected you before you were born appears and begs for acceptance, forgiveness, and even help when you are at the height of fame and success, is there any possibility of healing? Should Ava Chen open up to the father who caused her and her mother so much suffering, or is her distance fair, but cold treatment the best and most reasonable choice? If you were Ava, how would you face this challenging and complicated situation to maintain your self-respect, dignity, and that of your mother, and find true peace of mind,